Hi everyone, if you're joining me, I'm about to sort of have a chat, one of my Instagram live little interview chats with the flute player Gina Luciani, someone that I don't know, but I've just gotten acquainted with, so I'm really happy to have a chance to have a chat to her, and especially about the kind of the differing film session scenes. So Gina, if you know, does a lot of film sessions over in LA. So I'm really keen to sort of find out what the differences are between working on films in London and what it's like over in LA. So she should be joining at any moment. I'm seeing from my screen that I'm really right to have now booked a haircut. So it has been, last haircut I had was February 2020 and I've been trimming it myself. So I think it's about time a professional got their hands on it. So apologies, it looks like a complete bird's nest today. So any moment, I hope, Gina will join us, and like I said, I'm really keen to find out, you know, what the differences are when you're working on big film scores over in LA, and what it's, you know, whether there's major differences in London. And I can see Gina's joined, so I'm gonna see if she there we go. So request, and we should be in action very soon. And I hope that I've been saying Gina's name right. Luciani. I think that's probably right. Hi, Gina.
Hi. Thanks for having me. How are you?
I'm really pleased to welcome you. And it's morning for you. We're actually, this is probably the big, well, actually I did chat to Jason in Singapore once, but we're 8 hours apart. So early evening here. So good morning to you. And is it pronounced Luciani?
That's a funny story. So my family is originally from Italy, and then they ended up moving to Venezuela. So my dad is actually from Venezuela and moved here when he was like 17. But in the process of, you know, a couple generations being in Venezuela, they changed it to like a Spanish version of my last name. So it's like the way we say it is Luciani, but technically the way you would say it is with the hard C. So you said it correctly, but it's not the way that I say it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Luciani. Okay. That's brilliant. And yes, I wanted to ask you what your heritage was, and where are you today? Are you in LA?
Yep. I'm here in LA. Yeah.
Oh, and I just want to explain to people that I've never met Gina before, and we literally became acquainted last week through the medium of, and for people who think, you know, I mean, I there are things about social media I like and there are things I don't like, but we both met each other on Clubhouse, which is a kind of audio app where you can jump into rooms and people may be discussing things about my music education or diversity, or we met in a sort of film music chat, and you know, there's you could literally talk to people about anything. So and I thought, oh, I would be so interested to know what life is like as an LA session musician. So you mentioned that you know my violin teacher, I think, Belinda Broughton. Well, she was my violin teacher many years ago, and she sort of talked to me a bit about, you know, being a session player in LA. So is that what you spend the majority of your time doing? Let's just say pre-pandemic.
Yeah, that would probably be pre-pandemic, probably like I'd say 80%. And then I also do a lot of performances with different, you know, pop artists and stuff like that. You know what, it fluctuates because I'm full freelance. I don't have a full-time job. So, well, I guess you know, freelance is my full-time job, but I don't have like another job and then I do you know, freelance recording. So it always fluctuates the ratio, but most of it is recording. And then, you know, I do stuff on social media that's kind of like adjacent to my actual work. And it fluctuates too, depending on like how much I'm working. I don't know how it is for you guys, but we have like dead zones. Like usually like January is pretty dead, like around the holidays, and then in the summer, usually there's about a month or so period that there's just nothing going on. I think everybody's taking their vacations, and yeah, so you know, there's dead zones, and especially during that time, I'll do a lot more with social media. What about you guys? How is it there?
Well, it's slightly different for me because my main job obviously is working with the London Symphony Orchestra, and that's where
This is amazing, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Thanks very much.
So cool. Love that. Yeah.
We just sort of have the life we lead then is the majority of it is concert work. And then we do a lot of commercial work on the side. And I have dipped in and out of doing freelance sessions if there's time. Or but there's obviously a massive freelance scene here in London. But it is the same, as you say, you know, we tend to say it's like feast or famine. Sometimes there's just so much work you can't fit in, and then there's other months, you know, you'll be going, hello.
Yeah.
I'm free. So it is yeah, as with all things in the arts, it sort of goes in waves. But what was your music education in that case?
Yeah, so I actually started playing flute when I was 4. So I've been playing basically my whole life. And then when I was about 14 or 15 years old, we were doing a Pops concert in orchestra, and we were playing Pirates of the Caribbean as well as Phantom of the Opera, because both of those films had just come out.
Okay.
And so I just loved it, and it was like a light bulb moment for me, because I think until that point, I loved playing flute. I really enjoyed it, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do with it. The only things I knew of to do is like, okay, you can be in an orchestra, you can be a soloist, or you could teach. And that's like all I thought that you could do. And then I was like, oh, there's people who actually their job is to create music for film and TV. And I don't know where I thought that music came from before that, but I was like, oh, that's interesting. That sounds like a lot of fun to me. So I then started doing a lot of research, figuring out like, where can you actually do that? And here in the US, it's primarily Los Angeles, Seattle, and Nashville. And I had visited Los Angeles before and really liked it. So I was like, maybe I'll look at LA. And so then I was looking at teachers, and I found this flutist that was like basically the first call flutist here in Los Angeles. And he was teaching at both Colburn Conservatory of Music. Have you heard of Colburn before?
Oh, I don't know it, no.
Yeah, it's a very, very small music conservatory. So I ended up going, getting ahead of myself, I ended up going there for my undergraduate degree, and then I stayed with him and did my master's degree with him at the University of Southern California. But Colburn is this very, very small music school. It's newer. I think it's only been around for maybe like 10 or 15, no, it's like probably 15 years. And everybody who goes there gets a full ride scholarship. Which is really incredible for here. I know like it's different over there, but in the US that's like unheard of. Most of the teachers are like at LA Phil and like Los Angeles Philharmonic, and it's a really it's also, have you heard of Curtis?
Oh yeah, I have friends.
Okay, so they call it the Curtis of the West, basically. So it's like the same kind of thing, but just very, very concentrated. Just classical instrumentalist is the only thing you can do there. There's no composition program, there's no jazz program, nothing like that. There's not a vocal program. It's just very, very concentrated. So when I was there, there were anywhere between 4 to 5 flutists at a time. So I went there and studied, like I said, so concentrated, like no other I wasn't taking a history class or science or anything. It was music, music, music.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I did my master's at the University of Southern California, which has a really good music school as well, and stayed studying with my teacher. And that was my schooling. So I was in school for 6 years and stayed in LA after I graduated. And I, like, the whole goal moving here was to pursue working in films. And so when I was in my master's program and for my graduate studies, I started doing a lot of student films because there was a film composition program there. And so I just made friends with all of the composers, and I was just like, guys, this is what I want to do, so please have me be a part of your projects if there's flute on them. And so I mean, a lot of times I was actually like paying to do them because I was paying for parking and they didn't pay at all, so I was like kind of paying to do it, but
that's investing in your future in a way, isn't it, to just get the experience with, because of course nobody just sort of lands in these sorts of jobs without, well, you could end up, you know, the huge amount of luck. I mean, just to go back to your education there, did you end up doing things like having any side-by-side projects in things like LA Phil or on the session scene at all? Did that sort of, did you get any opportunities in that way? It doesn't, okay.
They don't really, I mean, at least in my experience, I hadn't heard of any opportunities like that. I did, you know, talk to some people who were very kind to me. I'd be like, can I take you to lunch? And I just want to hear about it. And, you know, my flute teacher was, he like retired, I think halfway in my schooling from session work. But he played on, he's like you play on like everything. And he played on everything. So it, like, his credit list is insane. It's like over 800 of like the biggest films ever. So so it was nice to be able to talk with him about what it's like. And I would always, he'd be like, oh, sorry, I'm, you know, kind of, you know, just getting back from a session, and he was teaching my lesson. I was like, what was it? Tell me all about it. I want to hear. Like, I was like, don't worry about the lesson. Just tell me about what you were doing, because that's what I wanted to learn about so much. So that was really nice, and that was a great mentorship that I had with him.
Okay, and actually, before a question popped up. It was about what basic flute for a beginner would you recommend? So,
Flute for a beginner.
Yeah, for a beginner. Somebody asked the question.
Probably. I mean, I have a video on YouTube about this, and I compare like I think 4 or 5 of them. So if you go to my YouTube channel and just type in my name, it's there. But one of the ones that has a very good bang for your buck would be, trying to remember the model, but it's by Trevor James. They have a really, really good one. And that's probably the one that I would recommend. Yeah.
Would you ever recommend anything like this?
Oh my God, do you play flute?
It's just as a brief story. A few years ago, I entered. It was a charity thing where you took basically the lowest exam, and you got sponsored for going and basically taking this exam. So I thought, what could I learn that would be really neighbor friendly and sort of I could carry around nicely? And I thought, oh, flute, okay, great. And my sister played flute when she was a kid, and we couldn't find it. And then I thought, and I actually got this in the US. I was visiting a friend, and I had it sent. I think it was just from Amazon. And I thought, oh, this is so nice. And what made me laugh was it came with white gloves and stuff. This is the sort of thing that bands use, isn't it? Like those.
A lot of times there's more colors in band and stuff. I mean, I would probably not recommend anything that's colored for the most part. There are some, however, there is, I believe it's called Guo. They have a plastic line of flutes, especially, you know, it's very budget friendly, and it's also good for little kids that might drop their instruments. Those ones are colored, and those actually sound pretty decent. But any of the metal flutes, I mean, that's I'm just painted on. So
out of this, I do have a very funny picture of the principal flute of the LSO playing on this with the conductor Daniel Harding sort of making a face, and he said, oh my God, he said, I can't believe how stiff these keys are. And I said, I've never played on a professional flute, so that just felt fine. It works, and it was like $100. So I just kept it because I love it. I should display it, actually. I was worried that I wouldn't be able to find it, but
that's amazing.
As an aside. But anyway, back to the conversation in hand. So when you started sort of getting involved in the world and just trying to do student projects and stuff. At what point did it start sort of roller coasting a bit for you with
Yeah.
real, films that you really
Yeah.
wanted to be involved with?
Well, so the first year was basically just student films. My second year, I started actually doing some more like professional projects, and I had a couple like wins for me. I got to, a lot of times when a pop artist comes through or there's some big show, a lot of times they will be using the session musicians for those kind of concerts too. So one of the things that I ended up doing was, have you heard of the Wu-Tang Clan?
Oh,
Yeah, so they were playing at Coachella, and it was like a month or two before graduating, and so I got to do that. And I'd never played a
fabulous.
concert outside of classical music, and so that was so much fun, and like way more people than I'd ever played in front of, because there were like, I think it was like 15 or 20,000 people, and so it was just, and it was broadcast, and so I was like, wow, this is amazing, thought it was so cool. And then just like smaller indie projects and stuff. I would say the next couple years outside of school, I was doing things here and there, but I was having to have other things to help supplement my income because it was just not consistent enough. But then probably about 3 years or so out of school, that's when things started picking up and a little bit more consistent. But, I like to remind people that like I had 4 years of undergrad that I didn't work at all. Like I had a couple gigs, but they were all just classical things. They weren't film at all. And so a lot of people think, oh, you moved to LA and you're going to be working right away, and there's so many jobs, and like, yes, there are a lot of jobs, but there's a lot of people, so it takes a while. I'm sure it's the same way there for you as well, right?
Yeah, kind of. It's a hard world probably to really break into. Would you say that what helped was the fact you were able to then start building a CV, or is a lot of it also word of mouth and doing a really good job in something and somebody saying to somebody else, this person was like great, professional, super, you should think about employing their thing? Is it
I would say, yeah, it's primarily that. It's because at least here, it's not like, oh, you audition for a principal or a contractor and then now you're on a list. It's not usually that way. It's more just like at some point somebody can't make a session for some reason, and so then they call in like the newbie, and then how do you perform? And then it just escalates, and you meet more people and you have more opportunities, and then if you're consistent and you're playing well, then hopefully you'll get invited back, and and then just kept building and building and building your network and meeting more people, and hopefully doing a good job on all those every single time you get invited back. And so it just it started building gradually in that way.
Yeah. And how many years have you been doing this now? I get the impression you're a very young person.
Oh, I think I look younger than I am because I've had a couple of videos that I've said something like, oh, I've been playing for 27 years, and people are like, you don't even look like you're 27, which is not the case. I'm like, thank you. But I've been in LA now for 14 years.
Okay.
So like I said, like those first 4 years I wasn't really doing anything. So I would say probably like in film music, probably like 10 years.
Yeah. So really super established now, but still very, very young, and looking young too. So
Thank you.
that's it. I've really enjoyed, actually, I saw on your Instagram a series of videos that you did.
Yes.
What they don't teach you in music school. I mean, I found this fantastic. That they were, they were quite short in that really each one was to the point, because I don't know, I get the impression people don't have a lot of
they don't.
You sort of think, oh well, that's 10 minutes, so I loved it. And is that something, did that start because you see these things happening? I mean, we obviously have had a little laugh at certain where people making a business card that is just totally unintelligible and stuff. Is this something that you'd seen a lot of and you thought, actually this is going to be quite useful for people?
Yeah, well, I've always enjoyed doing like tutorials, or like this past, I do a lot of lectures at universities and conservatories and stuff like that, and typically on like social media and building a career, and things like that. And I just realized I want to be able to get that information out into the world a little bit more. And like you said, like a lot of people aren't going to have necessarily the times, like the brain capacity or like the attention span to watch something for 15 minutes or longer. And so what really inspired me was I was just on TikTok, and there's a lot of tutorial videos on there that are like little tiny tips of anything and everything that you could want to know. And so I just thought, oh, this could be fun. And of course, yes, there are certain schools that do teach this, but in general, I don't feel like that's a class that every musician is taking. And you know, it's just like go in the practice room and get as good as you can at your instrument, and you're going to have a job. And that's not necessarily always the case, and you need to like know these things as well. And so that's why I wanted to like do the series.
Yeah, I think you're very right. I mean, when I was a student, and it's a long time before you were, none of this existed for a start, and you had no sort of lesson on either any kind of self-promotion or the way you behaved when you finally got out into the world to work. And it is a case that many musicians, you're not just leaving college and then going into an audition and finding a job and staying there for the rest of your career. It's having to sustain it in some way. And you know, it's the platforms are so important for people to engage about what they do, what they're passionate about. And often there hasn't been any. Some people are naturally great at it, and I imagine that this is the case with you. But for some others, I think they might struggle or feel like, you know, am I supposed to shout about what I'm doing, or who am I to tell people how they should be sort of approaching getting a job and things like that. But actually lots of people find it, I think, extremely useful, because it isn't something that we're naturally taught to do at all. So I think it's great. If anyone hasn't seen it, have a look on Gina's Instagram page. These little snippet videos, they're absolutely brilliant. Oh, you're looking younger than I am. Good. Yes, it is a good problem to have. Looking then you are, you know, just keep, you know, embracing that. So what would you say, are there any standout kind of recordings that you're really proud of, that you've been involved with, things that you just thought, like, I'm going to look back, I'm so happy I did that?
Yeah, so projects, you said, right? Different projects.
Yes.
Let's see. So some of the ones that I'm most proud of. Well, one of the things was Penny Dreadful. I don't know if you know that TV series.
Yeah, I watched that. Fabulous.
That was my first TV series that I played every single season. So that was really, really special to me. And I really loved the composer and his music and everything like that. I love what he did with that. So that was really special to me. Let's see. So one thing I will definitely never forget, it was, so it wasn't film, it was more in like the pop realm. It was about 2 years ago. I played with Kanye West for his Sunday service thing. And so we played Coachella, and it was like a 6-month stint, and it was like every single week. And that was like a completely different experience, because I was so used to, at that point, just primarily being in the studios and then doing one-off concerts with different artists, or maybe like 2 or 3 tops. And so that one, just the consistency of it and working in this different area, like all the musicians for the most part were all jazz musicians, and I did not grow up doing jazz. Like I can dabble, but I that's like the most I could say I could really do. So that pushed me a lot, and so that was a lot of fun to play that type of music. And now, most recently, one of the things that I'm most proud of is I recently played on the Minari soundtrack, which was nominated for 6 Oscars.
Yeah.
So it was exciting. Yeah.
Oh, such a thrill to be involved with things like that. I mean, I know certainly if I've seen a film and we've played it, I'm like, oh, that's so exciting. You know, you sort of think, well, made some kind of impact in this. And I mean, as you say, you know, you went basically sort of on a tour for 6 months. Was that an easy decision to make? Did you just think, this is just not something I can turn down. Did you worry about taking yourself out of other things for
I was
time?
right. Well, first of all, for that first rehearsal, I was terrified because I was like, did they mean to call me? I don't know. Like, I don't know if I was the right person, but it ended up being fine. But I didn't actually, when they first called me, I didn't know it was going to be more than just a weekend because I got a call and then they were like, we need you in rehearsal tomorrow and then there's a show on Sunday. And I said, okay. And then at the end of the show on Sunday, they're like, okay, see you guys next week. And I was like, oh, okay. And they never ever said like how long it was going to be. They just every single week, see you next week. Okay. I'm like, I don't know what's going on. And then yeah, we found out about Coachella like maybe 2 months prior, like maybe in March at this point. Or no, maybe February, end of February maybe. We were actually, it was kind of epic. We flew private to Portland, Oregon, because at the time, I don't know if he still is, but Kanye had like a deal with Adidas and his shoes are with Adidas. So we went to the Adidas headquarters and played a couple shows there, and we were on the plane back and he got on the intercom and was like, we're playing Coachella. And I was like, oh, okay, playing Coachella. And like the entire plane was just the band and the all the choirs, so that was pretty fun. But yeah, we didn't know. There were certain things I did have to turn down, and thankfully with the Kanye group, they were very lenient in terms of like, I have to miss a rehearsal because I have this other thing, and so thankfully I was able to, for the most part, move everything in and kind of maneuver. There were definitely some hard times. There was in particular this 1 week in May that we were I was playing at the Hollywood Bowl here, and we were doing a live to picture like Little Mermaid. So we were playing the behind us. That's actually why I started, was because of the Little Mermaid. That was my favorite film, and
It's my favorite Disney film.
Really, me too. I love it.
All the songs, totally.
Yes.
Yeah.
So there's a moment in there that the prince plays. It's actually a recorder. But I asked my mom when I was 4. I was like, "What is that?" And she's like, "It's a flute." So I was like, "I want to play flute." So so it was just kind of like a very surreal moment. And then Alan Menken came on stage and was playing like a little medley, and I was just like, "Oh my gosh, this is like my little 4-year-old self would have died."
Oh, that's lovely. I love that. It's sort of the whole circle of it. You know, sort of came back for you.
Yeah.
I mean, do you think? I mean, you said, you know, you don't have a background in jazz and things like that, and there was a bit involved. Do you think that it's good to challenge yourself with things, and you just think, I'm just gonna give it my best shot and just do it?
Yeah.
Because as musicians, there's always an element of imposter syndrome and feeling a bit like, can I actually do this? I mean, very much my attitude as I get older, because I just care less about what people think. Is like, if something comes my way and it's a bit of a challenge, or I think, I can't do that. My first instinct was like, I couldn't do that. I won't be any good at that. I just think, right, you're just gonna do it. You're just gonna do it, and if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. No one's gonna die from it. But you might find something that you really enjoyed, or got something out of, or brought something to someone. Do you think that's kind of how you kind of see the work? Because you never quite know what's going to come up.
Yeah, it's very true. And I mean, as a musician, the more well-versed you are, the better I think you are as a musician. And the more that, like, even if you're like, oh, I'm not going to do jazz full time now, but there's a lot of stuff that you can learn from that you can then apply to something else. So I think that that's really important. And I am always just trying to grow my knowledge, no matter what it is, whether it's, you know, flute playing, or I do a lot of world flutes, and so I keep building my collection. And I swear to God, every single day there's a new instrument from this random region that I've never heard of, and I'm like, oh, okay, we got to get another flute now. But it's fun. It's fun because then you learn about their culture, and you learn about the way they play music and make music, and the history of their music and the history of the instrument, and trying to play it authentically as much as possible. And so it's just a lot of fun to be able to create all these different sounds. And So that's fun. I really enjoy it. It's probably scary. Like the Kanye thing was scary, and some of these other things are scary when you're doing it for the first time. But just like anything else, if you're starting anything new, it's usually scary. And as a musician, you're always taught to, you're supposed to be a perfectionist at every single thing you do, and you've been doing this for so many years. And so then when you get thrown into something new that you haven't done before, it can be really terrifying because you want to be such a perfectionist at whatever that is.
Oh, I think that is so true of sessions, isn't it? Because with musicians, it's so ingrained in us to practice and prepare. This is what we do as children are, and until we get to being professional. And then when you're in a session, you have no chance to prepare. Of course, you know nothing. So I mean, I don't know. I'll be asking you about what it's like on a film session in LA, but you might end up doing a film. There's probably don't even know what it is. It's probably got a fake working title. You get there, even when you're music might not even be on the stand yet, so you go and get breakfast. You come back and papers are warm, and you're just frantically just looking through. The leader's checking, have I got any big solo? And you just have to. And it's like, right, time's money, red light on, we're recording. It is really, I think, quite stressful, the first, for people, or if you're not used to it. I mean, I've seen people come in as guests to the orchestra, or they're on trial for a job, and they're just like, oh, God, can't, be doing this. So is that kind of the same feeling for you guys over there too?
Oh yeah, I mean, you nailed it. Like, that's exactly what it's like here. And that's why I was so thankful that I did so many of those student films, because had I not done that and I had to just get thrown into, especially if it was like a bigger session with a full orchestra, I think I would have died. Like, I was, I mean, even going into that for the first time after having that experience, it was still incredibly nerve-wracking. So, I was just very thankful that I had that experience before. But I definitely, like I said, I always love being challenged. And I think that's what I love so much about film music, is you literally don't know what you're going to get. And some days it's whole notes, and that's it. And then other days, like when we were on that Clubhouse stream this past week, and we were talking about John Williams, and you're looking at, I will clarify, I have not played on one of his sessions. I've played a concert with him, and I've played his music, but I've not played a session like you have, which is incredible. It's amazing. But
didn't play all the notes, but
well, can anybody play all those notes? That's my question. Oh my goodness, there's so many notes. But there are certain sessions that you go to and you're like, oh my gosh, it's gonna be a day. It's gonna be a day.
And you can't go, oh, excuse me, composer, I haven't had a chance to look at this. You just have to do it. It just has to get done, and there's no room for it. It's quite skilled. I mean, I'm just glad I'm one of in a section. I'm, it's kind of, as Erica says, she's a bassoonist, and America, who I know, she says sight reading is such an important skill for these situations.
Absolutely.
So true. And it is something I think sight reading can really improve and be taught. I mean, I'm dreadful as a young person, because I couldn't get over the fact that if something went wrong, I was trying to look back and think about it.
Right.
Sight reading, it's that part of your brain that has to say, you've made a mistake, but you've just got to still look 4 bars ahead. So it is, it's definitely something you can improve. And if anybody wants to improve, basically get a whole load of music you don't know, try and get from A to D and not stop. It sounds horrendous. You just have to kind of, and some auditions ask for it, some don't. But that is the reality, of course, of being in a session. Now, I heard things like from my teacher, Linda, like sometimes she'd be like going, oh yeah, there's always like free food for us and things like that. And she said, oh yeah, they'll give you parking spaces. And I was like, hello? Don't do that. Well, you can't, there's like about 3 parking spaces down the road. But they reserve those for people who have, if you have to come here with a double bass or something from home.
Sure.
But free food, that's only ever happened a handful of times when clients...
Really? I mean... I would say most, especially when you're at one of the big stages. So for us, the biggest ones that, can hold a full orchestra would be Sony, Fox, and Warner. There are, I mean, I'm sure just like there are, I don't even know how many smaller studios of varying sizes. Some are like, you can fit a couple people in there. Some of them you can fit like maybe a chamber orchestra in there. But I would say for the bigger stuff, there's usually like drinks, not alcoholic beverages. I'll clarify. No alcohol. Water, coffee, maybe some juice, and then snacks. Varying level of snacks.
Oh, this is really impressive. Somebody's asking, where am I from? I don't know if you mean where am I from. I'm, I don't know, British Chinese. I was born here. Or if you mean I play in the London Symphony Orchestra. So that hopefully answers your question. But yeah, I can think of two times where once they put out all the pastries and it was a client, maybe a client's birthday, and another time where they put out something. But otherwise, it's so not in the sort of culture of I guess the London session scene. I'm gonna have to, you know.
You should suggest it. I'm sure that would go over well.
I mean, there's like a water fountain, but it's a bit. But I mean, the sessions are great and fun, aren't they? But I guess in the last year, have you set yourself up to do a lot of remote recording? I'm assuming you have. And what have been the challenges for that?
Well, you know, thankfully, I had actually been remote recording for about 7 years from now till then. So I already had a lot of experience with remote recording. I kind of just fell into it. I learned Pro Tools when I started in school just because my teacher's computer had Pro Tools. That was the only one he had, the only DAW he had. And I had to do some recordings for, I don't know, I think I was doing some auditions or competitions or something. And so I was using the studio computer. So I learned Pro Tools. And then this composer who I work for a lot, it was at the time in person. One day he asked me, he said, can you do a remote session for me? Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, when do you need it by? And he said it was like a week or something. And my then boyfriend, now fiance, he had a microphone because he is a filmmaker. He does directing and writing. And so he had a microphone they were doing voiceover for one of his past projects. And so it was just it was not an expensive microphone, but it got the job done. I was like, will this work? He's like, I'm sure it'll probably be fine. Just record, send it back to me. And if it's not good, you can come in. Don't worry about it. It's not a big deal. Mm-hmm. And so then I went on Amazon and ordered like next day shipping for an interface so that I could get, the music into the computer. But yeah, I did it, sent it off to him. He's like, it sounds great. I'm like, really? Okay. And I sent it off to a bunch of my other friends who are composers. And I said, can you just be brutally honest with me? Because I would never want to send something off that is not good. I don't want to ever do that. And they said, oh no, it actually sounds pretty good. So I recorded with that for a long time. Mm-hmm. And then about 2 years ago, funny enough, it was actually with the same composer who had originally asked me to do a remote session for him. Was working with him on something. Thankfully, it was not a quick turnaround because something short-circuited or something, and my microphone and interface were done. Just in the middle. I had just recorded everything, and I was really dumb. I usually always check the audio. That was like one of the only times I didn't check the audio. And I started listening back, and there was this hiss. And I was like, oh my gosh. And so then I ended up taking that opportunity to upgrade everything. So thankfully, just maybe 6 to 8 months before the pandemic, I had just upgraded my entire setup and put in sound panels and everything. So I was just ready to go. Yeah. So I was very lucky to have had that and had the experience with remote recording, because I know a lot of people were scrambling and the mail and post was so slow at the beginning, and the stores were closed, and it just took forever to get anything delivered to you. And
if you're savvy either, I mean, I'm not techie at all. It's a lot to learn. So it's great that you had already set yourself up and learned how to do it and had done it already, because I know that in London, actually things didn't stop for that long in recording studios, because they control the environment, I think. So, but I know that some session musicians suddenly just have to equip themselves with, it was about time when suddenly you had no income, and then you had to suddenly buy a whole load of equipment as well. Right. Sort of justify it and think, well, I am going to get work. It was interesting because I was asked to do a couple of remote recordings, and I was like, I've got a phone and an iPad, and that's it. So, but I said I'm very happy to have been asked. but I mean, we managed to do some recordings in the summer, actually, even at Abbey Road. But it just meant that you could only have strings on a day, not full orchestra, and then wind on another day, and everything just felt slower because the composer was like in one country, the director was in another country. You sort of, and also you're sitting on your own, so you can't even have a I was wearing a mask, and you can't even have a sort of little silent chat about it. But and you've made some, and is this the sort of technology you've used? I'm just, because I'm so not techie. When you've put together your flute playing in different, like the Star Wars things.
Yeah.
Is that, you know, because I was just looking, I think, oh, that's so complicated. But
well, thankfully I had that experience, you know, in like creating sessions and everything within Pro Tools. So I record everything into Pro Tools. There are apps that allow you to do that, but the quality is usually not that great in terms of like the sound and video quality compared to what I wanted to do. I'm putting a lot of time into those arrangements, so I want to make sure that, you know, it sounds decent. So yeah, and then I use like my actual microphone and things like that. So that's how I'm doing it, and I do a lot of video editing too. Thankfully, like again, like I said, my fiance is in film, so he taught me how to do some video editing. So I do it all myself, but I did have the added bonus of him like being able to like show me like, oh, this is how you move these things around and crop this, and you know, so I was thankful for that. But yeah, I was just so thankful like to have all that experience, because also a lot of people were doing those kind of projects during the, you know, during quarantine and everything like that. But that's so fantastic that you guys were able to work during the summer. We did a little bit of stuff, but for the most part, winds, a lot of times they wanted you to record it remotely. Just obviously it makes more sense for wind players or brass players. I did some stuff in person, but not a ton, just a little bit here and there. So, but things are starting to pick up a little bit more now for us.
Certainly in London, I think there's a lot going on in the studios now.
Good.
Especially since, you know, things have improved so much here, and I think they took very good control of the way that buildings were managed.
Right.
So just to remind people, if you've got any questions for Gina about anything to do with flute playing or the work she's done, do pop it in, and I'll try and try to get to it and ask the suitable questions. What else did I want? So what's the longest you've ever spent on one sort of film? Would you say, like, if you're remote recording for sort of like a big film or something, is that going to take you weeks or a week?
Yeah, I mean, like in person, I think the longest I've been on a project for like a single project, like a movie, was maybe 4 or 5 days. And double sessions. So I don't know how it is for you guys, but we do typically 3 hours and then an hour break and then 3 hours. Yeah. Is that how it is for you?
Yeah, usually. I mean, we do have 3 session days at times, but or it might be a rehearsal and then 2 sessions, which makes for actually a very long day. But usually, like, you'd want like 10 to 5 or something, which works quite well. Although, you know, just after lunch is never the best, the most.
Just falling asleep during that hour.
You sort of have to have a light lunch, so that, because studios are always going to be a bit sort of like no natural light and stuff, and all very. So it's just that sort of mentality. It's just coming into. What would you say was the film that you, or TV series or something, that you were really desperate to see after you'd recorded the music for it? Was there something you thought, I can't wait to see it?
Things that I couldn't wait to see. Probably, honestly, I know I mentioned it earlier, but Minari, because it was just like a very different score and like more experimental, and we had done a couple sessions for it, and then he was having me come back in, but at the end we were talking about all my different instruments, and he was like, can you bring in your ocarinas next time? And I was like, yeah, sure, let's do it. And then when I heard the final score, I thought he was like, oh, we'll just do it and see what happens. And maybe we'll use it, maybe we won't. And he did end up using it and like layering it with the flute. So it sounded really cool. So it was just really cool to hear it like all come together like that. But yeah, that was probably the biggest one. Animated ones are always fun just because, I mean, as you know, like a lot of times what you're seeing is more of like a sketch or the very raw version. It's not the final film at all. And so it's kind of cool to like see it all come to life. And one that is like that I'm thinking of right now was the new Lady and the Tramp that they had come out a couple years ago. I played on that, and it was just fun like watching it behind you and like, you know, try not to get distracted by watching. And do you guys usually have the screen behind you guys?
Yeah, you can usually see the film. Despla, who we work with the most, always wants screens there, so we would see it. And even it's funny because I remember doing Brave, a Disney film, and obviously the character had this big curly red hair,
right?
And a lot of the time she was bald because they hadn't finished adding it. It was a bit like, oh. Child wants to see this, yeah, it's kind of scary. We do have a question. Oh, my friend Tristan, who is a composer and orchestrator, actually, he says, what are the least idiomatic things you've seen in flute parts, and what are the nicest things you get to play?
I mean, right now, you know, a lot of people are doing a lot of composition like on the computers and using, you know, some kind of library, and so the computer is able to do a lot, and it doesn't necessarily work on flute. So you know, I think some of the hardest stuff is when you're doing a lot of jumping around in the very, very high register, so like maybe above a G, like 2 above the staff, like once you're getting like a lot of leisure lines up there, once you're popping around rather than just like, you know, scale, more like, you know, moving as a scale, going up and down, those things are a little bit easier because that's stuff you've practiced. But when you're like popping around a bunch, it's really hard. Or also in the very, very low register, a lot of people don't realize there's just certain notes that you're doing with your pinky, and you're going to get extra notes in there because of the way that the flute is designed. So a lot of things like that, it just doesn't fit very well on the instruments. A lot of people also don't remember that we have to breathe. That happens a lot. It's like this long thing, and there's nowhere to breathe, and you're just like, oh my goodness, this is ridiculous. So that's really hard. But in terms of things that, you know, sit a little bit more comfortably, you know, as a flute player, you're playing a lot of melodic kind of stuff and things like that. I always recommend for composers to, especially when they're starting out, to talk to players, because, you know, most musicians love to be able to look at a score and be like, yeah, you know, this doesn't sit very well on my instrument, but just get to know the instruments, I think, is so incredibly important, because, you know, every instrument has its problem spots that are just not going to sound good.
And I know that certainly because we work with a lot of young composers, I mean, not necessarily in film, but often they will think, oh, well, these are the reaches of the instrument, so I'll go for it. And you just think, actually, I haven't thought about, you know, that you cannot, you know, if you're going to go really high, it's not going to be pianissimo and things like that. So it really is about sort of finding what actually works. And someone says, what do you think is the greatest part for the flute in a film that is maybe you've recorded or you haven't?
Best flute parts. Oh my goodness. There's so many of them. I feel like John Williams uses flute incredibly well. I mean, but he uses every instrument really well, because here's the difference for people is I feel like a lot of young composers are very inspired by John Williams, and I've played pieces that clearly were very heavily inspired by John Williams. But the problem is John Williams knew how to write for instruments, right? Yeah. And so, like we were talking about earlier, there's a lot of notes and it's really hard, but you can play it on your instrument, you know, and especially if it wasn't a session situation, you had more time to practice, you'd be able to play it. And it sits well, like you can actually play it. Whereas some of these other things that they're writing, they're inspired by John Williams, but because they don't actually know the instrument well, then it's incredibly difficult to play, and you're like, this just doesn't work. And I know you're trying to emulate him, but you don't understand the instruments the way that he understood the instruments, you know? So I could go on and on.
No, it's so true, because you often get violin writing that has been done on the piano, which is perfectly fine to just do this, but then you're doing it's totally unviolinistic.
It doesn't work.
Yeah,
it doesn't work. But one of my favorite scores, and most people don't know this film at all, but I'm obsessed with it. It's called Dangerous Beauty, and it's incredible. I would highly suggest everyone to watch it. It fluctuates. It's sometimes on Netflix, sometimes not on Netflix.
Yeah,
but it's very flute and like classical guitar heavy, and it's beautiful. It's like a period piece, and about a courtesan, and it's beautiful. But I'd highly suggest for people to watch it. But I love the use of flute in it, and I think it's
right. I always think, well, Desplat writes well for flute because he's a flutist.
yeah, that helps.
Tell, which is good. There's a question about, you know, what sort of other genre of music do you like? Baroque, romantic music best? Is that, you know?
Yeah. I mean, like I of course have played all of those just as any other classical musician. I like it all. Probably as a flute player, I like a lot of like the romantic.
Okay.
Because there's just so many great parts for flute in that in there. But I mean, I'm a big fan of most things. But I do like anything that is has a good melody. I'm always drawn to melodies, and I mean, you know, you play a lot of melodies too, so I don't know if it's the same way for you, but
exactly,
there's nothing better, right?
Yeah, you want something you can sort of like hum along to, and you know, and it sort of, you know, makes you feel some kind of emotion. Of course, it's always, whenever I get asked about, you know, favorite moments or things like that, it always comes down to something which has basically got a gorgeous tune. That's kind of that's kind of a given. What have you got, any projects coming up that you can tell us about, or something you're excited to work on?
The ones that I can talk about, we are currently working on season 2 of Lock and Key, which is on Netflix. So it was a lot of fun to work on season 1 of that. So and I'm doing all the flutes. So season 1 I did all the flutes. I'm doing all the flutes for season 2 as well. And then I'm also doing Tales of Arcadia, which is also on Netflix. And so doing all the flute parts. That when you were asking about like longest sessions that I've done from remote recording, I forgot to mention this. Like we were recording, I forget how many episodes it was, but I recorded for basically 2 full days in the studio, like full days. And it's just, remote recording is like this different thing, because it's, you know, you're doing so many different jobs. You're doing the performance, right? But then now you don't have anyone listening back in the booth. And so you're having to edit your own stuff, thinking like, oh, that I didn't get that one note, or, you know, this could have been better. You're doing that. You're doing the engineering. You're doing all the editing and comping and sending it off. And so there's a lot of jobs. And so it's, in my opinion, more exhausting to do remote recording work, because you're just having to think of so many more things, and, you know, starting the session, making sure the levels are right. And there's just a million things about.
Thought about that. It's quite stressful, isn't it? Because at least in the studio, it's your moment, you do it, and then someone is there saying, we need to do bar 55 again or something.
Exactly.
And you've put the trust in the hands of someone else.
Right.
Yeah, that's so much work actually you're doing.
Yeah, it's a lot. But I mean, I enjoy it, and you know, it is a good challenge, and it's something different. And one thing that I do like about remote recording is that you do have like full, complete control over it, just because like you're the one editing together your performance rather than somebody else, and you can just make sure that you get it to the point that you want to be. As you know, in sessions sometimes they're like, okay, moving on, and you're like,
I don't want to be the one
that
say like, can we just do that again?
I know, and I hate being that person, which you have to do sometimes, because you don't want to like have something that's like messed up, but at least when you have control and you're doing it on your own, you can edit as many times, or do it as many times as you want to, so that you get that. And I'm such a perfectionist that like I'm sure like on some of the takes that like they'd be totally fine, but I'm like, oh, that one note I could have tapered just slightly more and it would have sounded better, and you know, so it's kind of
well, it's
a blessing and a curse, right?
This is why you're so successful, because what you do just sounds amazing. We've literally only got less than 5 minutes now.
Oh, wow.
It's gone so fast. But I'm going to ask you have you got any advice for people who don't have to be a flute player, but who wants to break into that sort of world, or, you know, basically follow a path into, you know, professional session life?
Yeah. Well, probably, I mean, the biggest thing is you can do remote recording anywhere in the world, which is fantastic. If you want to be doing this stuff more in person, the thing you definitely need to do is live in a place that has it. So that's the first thing. Research it. And it's not just the US, obviously. It's not just London. Like, there are a lot of other countries as well. So I think that is a really important thing, to be living in a place that has it. That's the first thing. And, you know, I do get a lot of people that say, oh, I'd love to, you know, do that on the side. And at least here in LA, it's not a side thing. This is like your life, and it's hard to get into. And it's not just something you do just like, oh, yeah, I'll do a couple of those. That sounds fun. It's like, that is what I put everything into to get to doing this. And it's not just a side thing. So, of course, be really good at sight reading, which we talked about earlier. Be good at following a click. Be good at like being with a metronome. Like, that's incredibly important. Just your typical things of like, you know, be easy to work with, show up on time, just like these common sense things. But a lot of people don't do it, and they don't get asked back. So
you have no second chance really in that world, because there's always somebody ready to kind of leap into that spot, I think.
Yeah, and every minute is worth so much money, because, you know, if you cost them an extra couple minutes, like you think of all the musicians there, the engineers, the recording space, it's so expensive. So you can't be the one who's causing problems.
The moment they go, right, we're thinking of overtime, and you just think, the amount of zeros that must be racking up on there. It's probably just sort of
it always gets so hectic when it goes into overtime too. It's like, okay, let's do it again. Let's do it. Okay, come on.
Right, this has got to be the one. Oh, Gina, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. I think we're on a Clubhouse talk on Wednesday together.
Yes.
Well, which is about. But anyone who's not, please follow Gina Luciani. I think I'm saying it right. On her Instagram, which is fantastic. There's so many little videos, and also the bits where you play all the harmony to amazing pieces. But I've learned more about it's quite different, obviously, the LA session world to the London one. So just to say, huge thank you. Have a wonderful day. It's only the start.
Have a good evening.
I know, and I hope to see you in LA or in London.
Yes.
Said you would come over at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. Sooner than later, hopefully.
So, well, good luck with all your projects, and thank you so much for giving your time for this. It's been really interesting. I can't believe.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I'm glad we connected. This is so cool.
I know. It's amazing what social media can do. So take care of yourself and stay safe.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.